Okay, so welcome to what the FnF. The F stands for fitness and financial, or however you want to put it, financial and fitness. So I'm Tim Yilmaz. I'm a longtime financial industry banker, investment, and now mortgage agent. Been in business for over 22 years. Um, my partner, Shahab, let's talk about yourself.
22 years, eh? Geez, you look like you're 22, buddy.
It's Asian blood, man. Asian blood.
It's the half Chinese in them.
Yeah, half Chinese and yeah, you know what? It's the Benjamin Button effect. If you ever seen that movie, right?
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. You kind of reverse
yeah,
an age. But yeah, no. So I'm Shahab. I've been in the fitness industry for about 10 years now. Um, and within my time in the industry, um, there's been a lot of changes when it comes to just what's better, what's new, what's hot, what's not. So we'll discuss a little bit of that. We'll discuss today a bit more about beginner friendly fitness ideas and how to get into working out, but just in a nice simple way. And we'll dive into a little bit of financials as well, because I feel like they both go hand in hand.
yeah, absolutely. Who doesn't like financial and fitness, right? And
No,
it's something that hey, we can relate, and we're just two guys from the GTA, here just to talk about these things. We also have, we do have a female on our team who's not here, who happens to be my wife as well, who is in the finance industry. So, we'll get her in our future podcast to join us. But like I said, if people like this, if people watching home, please hit the subscribe button, and we will continue these podcasts. Right.
yeah.
Also, I want to bring out that ANS performance, awesome. We're gonna talk about ANS performance, who I don't know what they do. I mean, I think you use ANS too, right?
I have it. Yeah, mine's in the corner there in the kitchen, but I
Yeah.
have the chocolate one. But I
Yeah.
I like the cookies and cream. It's probably one of my favorite
I
flavors.
mean, yeah. So, you'll see the link for ANS performance for our audience. Made in Canada. What can I say? And actually tastes really good. So,
It does.
we'll thank ANS for being our sponsors, and we'll go from there. So, you know, we talked a bit about, this is our first What the FNF.
Yeah, our inaugural podcast.
Yeah, in our podcast, and we know each other for quite some time, and me as a former athlete, thinking that I understand, how to work out, and knowing like like I thought I knew stuff until I took one of your classes, and I mean I don't know if you remember, but it's just like it is like what the F kind of moment for me. It's just like I couldn't make through your class.
Yeah, I don't
And,
think I remember you disappearing for a second, and then I don't know where you were.
yeah, and I can admit that, and it's just like I think from that day on, you and I became really good friends. But it's just like I learned like what I was taught and trained, or what I thought I knew, wasn't that it wasn't right. It wasn't, like you said, like we're gonna talk about fitness, like consistency, the things that you see in your industry. I mean, like, we went through COVID, and how many people bought Pelotons and the bike, like, me, I bought one, right? And what is it doing now? It's a great towel rack. Like, I can honestly say that, right? So, before we get into like my world in financial, let's talk about more your world, the fitness, and then how it all relates to the financial side, like especially stress. Everybody right now is financially stressed. And for a guy like you in the fitness industry, where this information, I know it's out there, but one of the things that I noticed in the COVID years, with the Peloton sales, and then the whole social media thing, is everybody talks about fitness or finance. And when they talk about fitness, they tell you, you don't know what's true or what works or what's not. So people just buy these things or do these things. So one of the things is, like, if I was a guy to get started with you, like, what is the key things that I need to do to get started? Like, one of the things is, like, I've always told that to lose weight, you have to do cardio,
Right.
right? So is it cardio? Is it strength training? Is it high intensity, plyometrics? So I'll let you go into that, job, and you tell me. Again, tell our audiences listen at home on this podcast.
Um, I think the number one thing, even before we get into that, I think the number one thing when it comes to fitness, but also I think any industry, finance, and when you brought up the point of seeing a lot of the finance stuff and fitness stuff during COVID, especially, I think one of the biggest things is you end up seeing a lot of stuff on social media, and everything that you see is meant to grab your attention, and it's meant to invoke some kind of emotional response. And that's why people buy, right? They have this like emotional response. But half the stuff that you see, number one, you don't know if it's legitimate. Uh, and number two, even if it is legitimate, like, do you really need that product or whatever it is at the time, right? Like during COVID, it was hard because everyone's stressing like crazy and there was so much uncertainty. So for a lot of people, when it came to the stress, shopping was a big thing. So, you know, the Peloton was there, and it's a great product. I don't have one myself personally, but I know a lot of people that do, and some use it, some don't. But yeah, it's all emotion at the end of the day, and you end up getting these things and hoping for a quick fix. So one of the things with fitness, especially, and finance, there is no quick fix, right? There's no such thing. So fitness wise, to answer your question, cardio or strength, especially when it comes to weight loss, the superior one is going to be, at the end of the day, it's going to be your muscle building. It's going to be your strength slash resistance training. And that's been proven over and over again. Your muscles carry you for your whole life. So that's one of the things I want people to kind of keep in mind is running will build your endurance and your heart rate, which is just as important. But if you're not working your strength along with that, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So to make a long story short, work on your strength when it comes to overall weight loss, but don't neglect your cardio, especially for your long-term heart rate health, your endurance health. So there's a time and place for everything. I never told people to not do a certain thing. I never told people not to run. I never tell people not to, not to lift, or not to, eat this after this time or whatever. Like nothing has to be dogmatic. Everything just has to fit within your life, your lifestyle, and then whatever the hell your schedule is. So if your schedule's super busy and only have time for 10-15 minutes, then maybe you do 10-15 minutes. But to make the most out of that time, maybe it's mostly strength, and you mix in your cardio within that strength. So with hit training and plyometrics, for example, right?
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you here because there's a lot of theories that I'm sure a lot of our listeners are or followers are wondering. It's like there's two things that I've heard. When you work out, you should do cardio first and then weight training. Or I've heard it the other way where it's better to do the weight training and then you end with cardio. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that I've heard is that, because our lives are so busy, it's hard. And this is where maybe you could touch base on consistency and staying consistent. Is either when people first start working out, they go too hard and then they give up, or they do it for a couple of days and then they give up because they find it's too much work because they're doing too much because they don't know what they're doing. And or the thing is that, or they do it, but they're like, okay, well, I can't do an hour. So if they said that it's better, maybe they do 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at lunch, and 15 minutes at like nighttime to do a 45 minutes. So is it better to break, or like I said, I've asked you many questions here, but like what's the proper way from your experience, like to let our listeners know, like what they're doing, because you must have seen so many times that how many people have started just like they bought these Pelotons and then they get excited, they do it, and then it's just cold turkey.
Right. Yeah. So for there's a few things to dive into there. So for the general population, like just general movement is going to be more than enough for what they need. So if they start off with like a little bit of lighter cardio first and then they do strength training, like it's not going to be the end of the world. But generally speaking, if you're going to do strength training, you want to just focus on that. Do a light, maybe jog for a few minutes just to get the blood pumping. But I want to do full on cardio because now you're tapping into a different energy system and essentially you're kind of depleting your stores that you would need to lift a little bit more heavy and focus on strength. So if you're primarily focusing on strength, I would just focus on strength. Warm up, do your dynamic stretches, focus on your strength, and maybe you can cool down with a light walk and a light jog at the end. If you're going to work on your cardiovascular health, your heart health on any particular day, then you would focus more on just that rather than doing that and strength at the same time. But depending on, like, different athletes, for example, have different protocols. Their whole program is vastly different from your gen pop. So for athletes, it's entirely different. They might do multiple training sessions in a day, but when it comes to people like myself or you and just mostly the people listening right now, no one's going to hit the gym twice a day, unless they're competing for something. Right? We're talking fighters, bodybuilders, any kind of athletes. But for the general population, they got one time, they go in, they do their stuff, and then they come out. So to answer your first question, yes, it depends. Everything would depend. So, but I would do just one thing and not mix in two, right? So I wouldn't do strength and cardio on the same day. It'd be too much, and you would need to focus on recovery after for a while.
And sort of like, and I think that's the problem. I think like when a lot of people who go sign up at the Good Lives, I mean, you used to be, I think, a trainer at Good Life or LA Fitness, one of those things,
Yeah,
right?
those
And no disrespect to Good Life, and they're great gyms, but it's just like, I find that when people who join the gyms, they don't get educated, so they don't know. They get shown the equipment in all the different rooms and all that stuff, and one of the things that they could join and do. But I find when people, they don't know where to target. Like they just go, okay, I'm going to do a few reps of whatever, and then I'll do, oh, you know what, the Stairmaster looks good, I'll go on that. So there's no,
there's no
flow is the right word, or setup. And then the next day they go back to the gym and they're like, what do I do now? Like it's like, so I think that's really key in that importance, that education. But it's just like, I think that's what you're saying is that, and I'm glad you touched base on that if you're going to do strength and conditioning, like don't do like all the other things. Like maybe you just do that for a day and then next day you do something else, right? It's just, I think people try to do too much all at once.
It's that excitement factor, right? Because it's new and it's different, and eventually that whole new and different thing kind of phases out. So initially you're very motivated, and then motivation just runs out. So now you need a different reason, a different reason for the juice to flow, right? So that's when a plan comes into play, because you want to be able to go in and know pretty much exactly what you're doing. There's a few people that I work with remotely, and I give them a plan and we check in like every 2 weeks. But yeah, once you have a plan, you're good. But motivation will still go up and down because nothing's linear, right? Like once you start on any kind of fitness journey, it's never going to be just this linear kind of graph. I'm showing it up, but most people, they want to kind of come down when it comes to the weight, right? But your motivation will kind of go up and down. So now we're kind of going a little bit deeper into the psychology of things, but essentially, yes, when people first start, they're kind of all over the place. They go all over. They don't know what to do, so they're doing whatever is available at the time, which honestly is good because at least they're moving, which is great. But most people have some kind of a vision as to how they want to look or how they want to feel. So they might end up feeling, pretty good just by moving psychologically, but they're probably not going to get to exactly where they want to be if they're just doing like random stuff here and there, right?
Yeah.
So a plan comes into play, and eventually when it comes to your motivation, you'll have to focus more on your discipline and your deeper reasonings as to why you want to continue. So that's when, longevity comes into play. That's when family comes into play. That's when your own health comes into play. Most people will start working out because they have a health scare, right? And then those are the people that will kind of continue on and do what they have to do. Some people won't, though. Even after a health scare, they'll still kind of be sedentary. But ideally, you want to get to a moving point even before any of that happens. So finding a good reason for yourself to start on the journey. Anytime's a good time to start. Hell, man, honestly, age doesn't even matter. Age never matters, right? Like, I know people who started in their 50s and 60s and 70s, right? People
So
as young as 10.
because you said age doesn't matter, right? Like, is it important, because a lot of our listeners don't know this, is it important for people that don't really work out, before they go into the gym, maybe consult a person like you, just so they could do, like, I've heard that people do assessments just to see what they can do, because you don't want to be a 60-year-old guy who doesn't work out and all of a sudden just jump on the treadmill, right?
Right.
And then your heart rate, your blood, or whatever, you can't take it, or it's just knowing your body limitations, I think. And like, is that a fair assumption that it's recommended to see a coach or trainer like you to get an assessment and then get a plan to help them build towards that?
Yeah. Honestly, even if they get an assessment, but they don't, let's say, the assessment is just to check on more things and just make sure you're on the right foot. So whether they invest in anything or not, that's going to be their decision at the end of the day. But at least to have an assessment, especially if you're a beginner, then you should, and just to see like how you move your body and what the limitations are. So if I'm doing an assessment on someone, and let's just say they tell me right off the bat, listen, budget's tight, whatever, but I'm a beginner. I just want to, I just want to like see where I'm at and see what I need to improve upon. Even though I can't, I can't commit to anything at this point in time in my life. They're like, okay, that's totally fine. At least let's just see where you're at, and then make sure you're kind of on the right foot. So it's more of a safety thing for them, right? So at least I can tell this individual, just depending on what their situation is, okay, listen, your heart rate went this high for this kind of simple movement that we did, so I wouldn't go too crazy on cardio right off the bat. I would kind of work our way up to it. If you're a true beginner, you should never go crazy on anything, really. Doesn't really matter what your age, but you should get an assessment just to see where you're at, and then just like do your own due diligence, do your own research as well, because everything will help, and then you can ask questions to someone.
I mean, no, this is great, Shubham. I mean, and we'll make sure we'll have your, because this is our podcast, we'll always make sure that we'll have our links or your links there, so anybody could contact you, especially our listeners. But this is like, I was reading an article, like, this is a huge industry. Like, there's so many of these like books and training guides, and we talked about social media. Like, it's just so much, is that people don't know what's real, what's going on. Like, it's just like I was, I think it was like I was reading like more than 1 million copies were sold of this. I forgot the book's name, and if I remember, I'll put it in our site. But it was just like, eating habits and nutrition and how to lose weight. These kind of like self-motivation books that people are just throwing money away.
Right.
And it's like, these books are not cheap, they like 20, 30, 40, $50. And I'm thinking, like, if they just spent the money, or spent the time to consult a person like you to get a proper plan, because there's so many of these things, because it's a business, they're making money, and they're telling people all these theories. Like, one of the things that we'll maybe not talk about today, but we'll talk in our next podcast is, do we fast? Do we fast intermittent fasting? Or, is the theory is that, do we eat, breakfast, and the one theory I heard is you eat breakfast but you don't eat lunch, and then you skip dinner, but you have meals in between. Like, there's so many theories.
Yeah.
right? And it's just like, people are getting confused about, especially, and no respect to any of our listeners that are a little bit on the bigger side, but it's just like they don't know, they want to lose weight, but they don't know which way, and then they're getting frustrated. Like I have a few friends that are a little bit bigger, dad bods and stuff like that, and they want to lose weight, and they're trying all these different things
Right.
and working out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're like, well, I'm not doing anything. And I get it, food and eating and working out all plays a part.
Yeah.
It could be what they're eating or what they're doing too, that's why they're not seeing results. But they buy all these self-help books.
Yeah.
And then it's like they're like, what am I doing wrong? And it's like, I read this guy and I read this guy, and then it's like, there's one guy, it's like, hey, like what's the one big one that everybody's doing, that was doing in the COVID time, keto diet,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like it's just, oh, you eat the fats and or eat all this, and you don't. So
Right.
it's just like, this is the problem in this industry, right?
Mhm.
The same thing with financial. Everybody went into the crypto craze, right? Everybody went into
Yeah.
all these things, and the marijuana craze when weed came out as stocks, right? So it's just like
Yeah.
people don't know what's real and what's not, and it's just like your thoughts on that, Shahab. Sorry, I know I
Uh,
went a little bit crazy here
no, it's okay. It's okay.
for our viewers.
Uh, that it reminded me of that whole I think it was GameStop, that
Yeah,
stock that just like went crazy, right?
went
I wish I
crazy.
knew about it when it was happening. Otherwise, I probably would have bought into
Hey,
some.
I knew about crypto 15 years ago, and I didn't listen to my brother-in-law, and he was like, "Oh, we should all buy this," and I'm like, "What's this guy talking about?" And look at where crypto is at today, right?
I know, I know.
But
It's wow, but it's so volatile too, right? So that's a crazy thing.
yeah, that's the topic for one of our next podcasts. But
Yeah.
let's finish what you have to say here on this part.
But the book, okay, so with like nutrition books and self-help books, they're great, honestly. Like I have fitness books, I have nutrition books, I got like the motivation self-help books. And they're great. Honestly, as long as you, let's just say you read one and whatever sticks out to you, apply it. Right. I think with a lot of people, they'll read it or they might not. I'm not sure, but if they read it, they might not apply every single thing, or they're trying to get in too much information at the same time, and then you have what they call paralysis by analysis. Sorry, there's too much. There's too much
Yeah,
information. So if you're gonna read something, just read one thing, and then just maybe you read a few things in a certain book over and over again, and really understand it, really dive into what it's trying to say, and then see if you can apply it to your own life, because that's going to be the biggest thing. It's not necessarily about what time you're eating, and if you're stopping eating at a certain time. No goblins are going to come out of under your bed if you eat carbohydrates after 8 p.m. Like, no, nothing like that's going to happen. But if you can find a way that works with your life and how you're eating, then that's going to be the way. That's going to be the way for you. Now, when it comes to what to eat and what, like, that's a totally different topic, and we can dive into like a whole wormhole when it comes to that, because everyone's life situation is different. Like, some people got 3 or 4 kids, and then they're cooking for them, and then they're cooking nothing for themselves, or it's all the good food for the kids
yeah,
and nothing too healthy for them, or it's they grew up eating out for most of their life, so at their house it's mostly boxed items. You know what I mean? Like, food can be very psychological, so
absolutely.
it could be a combination of breaking certain habits and then slowly implementing more whole foods, or if you're the type of person to just quit all that cold turkey and then just start fresh, it could be that too. But I find most people, if they go gung ho, then they eventually stop.
And
So it's better
yeah,
off just implementing slow changes, especially when it comes to what you're actually eating and fueling yourself with. Um, I know that's kind of like a broader
no,
answer.
but I think that leads to your consistency, like people staying consistent, because and we'll talk about this in our next podcast about food and fasting, and another topic that we'll talk about is the importance of sleep, sleep habits, how that all plays into the mind of weight loss, working out, all that stuff. So we'll talk in our podcast, and hopefully our listeners will join to that podcast. Um, but it's just like there's so many aspects of
Yeah,
just it's not just simple, let me work out to lose weight. There's so many key things
yeah,
that you have to, I guess, train yourself to do. Because I mean, I've cut turkey, where, like I believe that, hey, no carb diet. So you don't do carbs.
right.
And then, but I noticed, like, few days of doing it, I had like a withdrawal, like cravings, or and we'll talk about stress in our next podcast too, stress and work, sitting behind the desk, which I do, where when you're busy, you forget to do your workouts, but then what's a craving I get? Eating junk food, right?
Mhm.
Or feeling that void that I start binging. I'm like, oh, there's some, and Shar, when she'll join us on our next podcast, she'll tell you, like, I'm weak. Like, I'll see things in the cupboard. It's like Oreo cookies. Here we go, right? And it's not just having one; it's like having 4 or 5,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So, like, I'm guilty. And hence the reason dad bod, right? But anyway, so.
you're fine.
But these are things that I would like us to elaborate in our next podcast. But it's just, you're right. Like, beginner mistakes, and can find a consistency, because, and I think the key is, and I hope a lot of our takeaway from from this, that our listeners listen to that, is that they got to have a plan, and a plan that fits them. And you said something really key there, that they got to make changes, but nothing too dramatic. Like, it's just,
Yeah,
something that they could just get into, and then build that flow, and then as they go through the days and weeks, then they could add a little bit more tweaks to here. And I think that's where it's important to have a training coach like you. And I'm glad you touched base on the books, that it's good to read, but it's just, when there's a lot of information, it gets overwhelming. It's just like the stock market and in the finances. Like, right now in my world, it's just everybody's like, they're all coming for renewals. 2025 and 2026 is a big year for renewals. And,
yeah,
and a lot of these clients, they were at, the low rates of 1.79, 2%. They're like, okay, well, man, the rates are 4.5, 5%. What do I do?
right.
Right. So
Yeah,
it's one of those things where, it's caused a lot of stress. And we'll talk about stress too in fitness and finance in our another podcast too. But it's just how all this relates. It's kind of neat in the sense that fitness and financial, it connects to life, in our life, in our well-being, right? So
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think that's the beauty of it all. And everything's connected, right? So, like, fitness and finance is just like, it's funny. Like, you can be making a lot, and you can be the most unfit person. So, like, you're not going to be able to enjoy it as much, right? But you can be also fit and not have too much. But at the end of the day, as long as you're happy, you're like from within. You know what I mean? Ideally, the spot is, to be good in both, right? Whatever good means to you. So that's why I think, they both really go hand in hand, which is nice. And then we can both talk about, like, our own experiences with like your experience with finance, my experience with fitness, and have people apply whatever they can apply. Um, so, if buying crypto is for you, then maybe buying crypto is for you.
yeah.
I can't, because it's too much.
Well, it will create a lot of stress too. So, if it's because of the volatility. But I mean, it's like, people don't realize, like, fitness, finance, it all, like you said, it relates. And it's just like, you know, how does, and this is the thing too, right? Like, with these tariffs coming in, right, or already happening, what does that look for us in the long term? Like, are things going to get more expensive, right? In terms of, what we're able to buy. So then, now that things are expensive, people are more cautious. Are they going to put time for their fitness,
Right.
right? Like, and let's be honest, I don't know, I'm going to speak on my behalf. I don't work out well home by myself. I need that coach or somebody to be with me to give me that motivation. Or, because I'm a former athlete, sports guy, played on teams. If I'm going to practice or going to a game, I have my teammates
Yeah.
to push you, right? Like that's why, like if I could, I would love to be in the gym every day with my teammates training. But
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you ask me to do it myself, no matter if how organized I write it, yeah, I'll do it. But the intensity or the push or the drive is not as good or deep when I have somebody like a trainer like you, or I have a teammate
mhm.
that is giving me that extra push,
Right,
right?
right,
So
yeah. It's a different levels of accountability, right? So for some, yeah, like hiring a coach is fantastic. For some, it's that group class setting or the team setting, right? And it's at the end of the day, that's all psychology as well, right? Like everyone's got a different kind of motivation point. But at the end of the day, whatever pushes you, um, for some, they're a little bit more self-conscious when it comes to stepping foot inside a gym or going outside and playing that sport. So that's when some one-on-one comes into play. Um, but honestly, at the end of the day, if anyone's ever curious about anything, whether it be fitness or finance, they should always at least reach out and just ask and
yeah.
not have to worry about, are there any is there any obligation to do anything? I was like, no, there's never any obligation. Like if people talk to you, you're not going to be like, all right, well, sign this paper for this mortgage. No, if they have questions, they'll ask you questions, and it can just be a conversation, right?
Absolutely, and that's what it is. Like my role is people are afraid to contact guys like me. Like I'm the mortgage guy, but and then with my banking experience and Shar, who will join us on our podcast, who's a financial advisor, we're here just to help clients, and advice is free. At the end of the day, advice is free.
Mhm.
Whether you like same thing with you, advice is free,
Right.
and hence the reason why we're sharing our industry knowledge, in this podcast because in the end of the day I remember when I used to go to the gym and I wanted a trainer like you, I was afraid to ask questions because I was afraid that they were trying to sell me on, oh, well, you know what? If you want this, here's this package, here's that package. And that's what they did. They did
Right.
that to me at the gym that I was going at.
Yeah, yeah.
And, not all banks, but I know, there was a great article in the Global Mail a few months ago that, the banks forgot about the advice piece and they're just product pushing, right? And I think that's where clients or people and some of our listeners are scared. They're afraid to ask these
Yeah,
questions, right?
yeah,
Or ask to get some tips or advice and not realizing that. And they, we're in the service industry. We're here to give advice. And our advice sometimes, like your advice or my advice, or when Shar joins us, it might not be the advice that suits you or might not be the answer that you're looking for. And
Mhm.
then they we're human beings too. Like we'll give, our advice is based on our experiences and what
Right.
we've seen in the industry.
Yeah, yeah,
But it
yeah.
doesn't mean it's to correct or suited for you at that time, right? And
Exactly.
that's why, like, in my world, in the mortgage world, people are asking me, what should I do, Tim? Should I do fixed or variable? Or, what can I do with this? So
Yeah.
it's if I had a crystal ball, I could tell you, right? And it's a tough call. And I know when CTV made that news report, a few months ago in the summer, last summer, it was just like everybody was doing 3-year fixed, and 30-year amortization. Now it's all changed. But in the end of the day, when I sit down with you as a financial guy, or Charlene sits with them, it's more like how do we look at your financial picture and try to keep you like this,
Yeah.
like balance, not debts like this, income like this, like try to be balanced so you could enjoy your life.
Yeah. Mhm.
So it's one of those things that we will also talk more in the financial world and the markets. Right now, we know rates went down 25 basis points, which is great for people who are currently in a variable rate because their rates have dropped. On the
Mhm.
fixed side, we'll see what happens because I know when things are nervous like this, and this is why we're talking about like in the increase of tariffs, that it might affect you as well because then people might get scared to come to you for because they think you're going to charge them. Where it's just like things are getting more expensive that investors now they're worried about how their investments doing. They might invest into bonds, and bonds are more safer choice where if they invest to bonds it drops the yields, and fixed rate mortgages follow those bond yields or the bonds. So if the yields drop means that the interest rates are going to drop. So it's going to be interesting to see. We know
Yeah.
April, I think, was it April 2nd that Trump's going to do the an increase of tariffs. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But right now for us and for fitness guy and for a financial guy like me and Shar, it's just trying to manage and mitigate to give the clients a balance. And I think that's the same thing in your world in fitness that people want the six-pack abs and all this stuff, but it's you're more like, hey, let's get you in a state where you're balanced and healthy and living life comfortably. Is that fair to say that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think in our podcast we'll leave our infos there. So anybody want to contact us, and maybe we got to get ANS on here. We got to get ANS, Nick, to talk about, and it's like, why does it taste so good? I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I like the fact I know it's disappearing on the screen
because
here,
it's
but
like disappearing sometimes on the screen.
Yeah.
Too.
I gotta get a better camera. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, real science, real results, made in Canada. So I mean, like, that's a good thing. So I mean, there won't be tariffs on this, which is good, right? So, but I mean, like, at the end of the day, it's just like I think we gotta get Nick on our future podcast.
Yeah. Have like different guests and whatnot. But hopefully for people listening right now, you take away at least one little thing that you can apply into your life right now, whether it be from the fitness side, whether that be from the financial side of things. But one little golden nugget, and we try to keep these episodes short, so half an hour, 35 minutes, whatever, right? But yeah, no, I think that was great.
No, it was good. And like I said, for people at home or listening or watching this podcast, we'll have our links and contacts below, so you could always reach out to us. If you're interested in ANS Performance, you could click on that, check what they're all about. If you do buy from ANS Performance in the coupon code, just put Tim20, you guys will all get 20% off for guys listening. So I'll send the link below for that. But yeah, we'll talk next time. We have lots to talk about, so we'll see what our next topic is on what the FnF. Remember, FnF, financial fitness or fitness financial, however you want to put it, Mr. Shahab.
Yeah, it's the two good F words.
The two good F words. I like that. But obviously, based on our conversation, there's so much to talk about. We didn't get through everything. And like you said, we could take a deeper dive, but this is more an intro to everybody across wherever they're listening to. We want them to join us, and we would love for them to contact us. And any questions that they ask us, we could bring it up in this podcast and discuss. But no, this was fun. This was great, and we'll do this again. So anybody at home, please please hit subscribe and watch out for our next video. Anything else you want to wrap up, Shahab?
No, I think I think you pretty much summed it up, man. Yeah, our info will be at the bottom. So, and the goal is to eventually kind of put this on, Spotify and whatever else, or wherever else you listen to stuff. But yeah, no, hope you guys join us next time.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just two guys and a girl. Char's not here, just giving our own opinion and advice, and we hope everybody at home likes it. Okay, so we're going to sign off, and we'll talk to you. See you guys soon.
See you guys.